this was over 20 years ago, like 1996, I think he graduated. And everybody thought he was crazy because he's like, how are you going to build a business just treating golfers, you know? And luckily for Greg, what he says is around that time is when Tiger Woods became really popular. People started to notice how much the physical aspect of golf really plays like, an important role in that. Whereas golf was kind of that joke around game where you could go and have a beer and give the out shape and still play golf, right? So then Greg, second word, yeah, awesome, perfect. So then Greg Rose started this clinic in Maryland, and he was full in like 2 months, just treating golfers. Had some of the top golf professionals in the world sending him people, and then Titleist, the Titleist guy, the founder of Titleist, he came to him and was like, "Hey, I want to hire you." And so then they moved everything over to Oceanside, California, where Titleist headquarters is. And now to the TPI Institute, if you're a huge golfer and you have a couple extra $1,000 laying around, I'd recommend going to Oceanside and getting an assessment done by Greg and their facility, because it's one of the most amazing facilities like out there in golf. And that's where they have all the computers and everything. But so that's kind of my story. So then I went to chiropractic school. I founded TPI because Greg Rose went to Palmer and came and talked at homecoming. And then I found TPI and I was like, this is my stuff, you know? So I just became certified in it and took the courses and just kind of been studying the golf swing more biomechanically. And I wish I would known this stuff when I was in college, because I would have probably played a lot better and been able to play more matches because I didn't have back pain. So that's a little bit about my background. And then, so today we're going to talk about ground reactive force. Has anyone here ever heard of ground reactive force? Do we have any engineers in here that are like super physics geeks? Okay, good. Okay. Okay. So we're going to be talking about ground reactive force and yeah, right. And how important utilizing the ground is in getting it into the club. So essentially what ground reactive force, I'll go over this, but it's, so if you step on a scale, right, you weigh 100 and I weigh 180 pounds ish. So if I step on a scale, I weigh 180 pounds. If I come down and I push up, that scale will go up, right? That's because I'm pushing force into the ground. Now in the golf swing, that's essentially how we generate all of our power, is by actually pushing that force into the ground. And then now we've generated it, and the job is to get into the club, which is the hard part. So being efficient, and your body plays such an important role in all of our joints throughout our body, plays such an important role in getting that energy and actually increasing that energy throughout the through the golf swing. So does anybody before we start have any questions? It can be anything about golf, it can be anything about chiropractic, it can be anything about.
What's your current handicap?
I'm a 3 handicap right now. Yeah. I haven't played as much golf as I'd like to, but yeah. Does anyone have any questions that they want me to answer throughout the presentation? Before we start? Nothing? Any dying questions about the golf swing?
Is it all in the hips?
A lot of it's in the hips. It's not all in the hips, but a lot of it's in the hips, and you'll learn that. Anything else? All right. Okay. So here's just a little thing about just a stat. So TrackMan, who's when you have a golf simulator, TrackMan, most popular brand on the market, they did a study in 2017. They basically showed, they took all the guys on the PGA Tour that could hit the ball the farthest, they looked at how much money they won, and there's a huge correlation that the guys that hit the farthest just won the most tournaments, made the most money, right? So distance is definitely a huge advantage when we're talking about golf. So just a little bit of background about kind of some anatomy and some basic stuff that I really want you to think about. And if you guys work out, think about this while you're working out. But our body's an alternating pattern of mobility and stability, right? So we want to essentially, through our joints in our body, we want to alternate mobility and stability. And if one of those joints is supposed to be mobile and it's a stable, acting as a stable joint, or one is supposed to be stable and it's acting as more of a mobile joint, that's a problem. And I'll kind of get to that. But the foot essentially is supposed to be stable. So let's just say I'm doing a single leg balance test and my foot's moving all over the place. That's not a good thing. It's going to lead to problems up the gym. Okay. My ankle is supposed to be mobile. So I need to move my ankle in order to move efficiently throughout life. Then our knee is more of a stable joint. I know our knee moves, but it's not supposed to twist. It's not supposed to go side to side. It's basically supposed to be stable and only move in one plane of direction. Our hips, very common and very important in the golf swing, are supposed to be mobile. So a lot of people just don't have the mobility that it takes to get into a good position here, right? Our low back is supposed to be stable. So we don't want to see rotation throughout the golf swing in the low back. Our mid back or our thoracic spine is supposed to be mobile. And then the bottom of our neck is stable and the top of our neck is mobile. And it goes into the extremities too. So the shoulder blade, so a lot of people have shoulder problems. They maybe have decreased range of motion because they can't separate their shoulder blade motion from their actual shoulder joint motion, right? And so forth, it kind of goes down. But today we're going to be really focusing more on the pelvis and the low back and the mid back related to the golf swing. Any questions about that? Does that make sense? So just think alternating patterns. So when you go to the foot to the ankle, it's supposed to be stable, mobile. That'll kind of help you understand a little bit of this. So what is the body swing connection? So TPI came up with this. And so the body swing connection is there isn't one way to swing a golf club, right? Every golfer, you look at their swing, not one of them has the exact same golf swing. And no one should really try and duplicate their swing to a specific golfer, right? Because let's just say let's compare John Rahm and let's compare Justin Rose, right? Justin Rose is one of the most flexible players on the PGA Tour. John Rahm is probably the most inflexible player on the PGA Tour. So if John Rahm were to try and copy Justin Rose, he would not be able to get into the positions that Justin Rose can get into. Therefore, he's going to have to compensate, which is going to be less efficient, right? So understanding what your body can do and then building a golf swing around that is really what you want to do. It's not the opposite. Don't try and build a golf swing around something that you can't do. And I'll get into that a little bit more. But if you don't have the requisite stability, strength, or mobility, you can either choose to modify your swing or to improve your physical tools, one of the two, right? And the best golfers in the world, they work on both of them, right? So they work on stability, they work on mobility, and they also keep modifying their swing. But that's the body swing connection. So the body is the most important thing in the golf swing. And I always say the reason why good golfers can be so consistent is because their body moves the exact same way every single time. So I like this little diagram because you'll maybe have watched Full Swing. Who's here watched Full Swing, the documentary, right? And in there they showed guys training for golf, right? But the thing is a lot of people will Google and they'll say, okay, what are the top exercises that I can do for my golf swing to get more speed, right? Well, if you don't have the mobility and the stability, we shouldn't be training speed. And this is where we see a lot of injuries, right? Somebody will go to the gym and they start training power and speed, and they're doing these crazy exercises that these top athletes in the world are doing because they see it on Full Swing or they see it on Instagram or something like that. But they really don't have the stability, they don't have the foundational components. So having the mobility, having the stability are these foundational components where you can then build efficient strength, power, and speed off of, right? So really getting into a routine where you can do this every day. I try to give all my patients a routine where it takes them literally 5 to 10 minutes a day, every single day, and we hit their deficiencies. And we just say, like, if somebody can't rotate through the mid-back, I'll say, okay, we're going to do 3 mid-back exercises every single day to try and increase your mobility. And then we're going to increase your stability maybe in your low back or in your hips. And then we can start to improve strength, power, and speed off of that. But if you kind of start backwards, which a lot of people do, a lot of amateur golfers, you get a lot of injury, or you just create poor movement patterns that aren't really helping. Does that make sense? Okay, so what is stability? A lot of people, they understand mobility, right? But a lot of people don't really know what stability means. So stability in the golf swing, right? It's necessary for acceleration and deceleration in the golf swing. Now, we're going to talk about deceleration because a lot of you are probably like, why do I want to decelerate in my golf swing, right? Does anyone know what I mean by deceleration in the golf swing? Slow down your swing. So slow down the swing at the end, but actually during our swing, we actually start to decelerate certain parts for then that next segment that's supposed to move to allow it to accelerate. Okay, so we have to be able to accelerate and then slowly decelerate. So you'll see a lot of people in the gym, they'll be doing like crazy exercises like this, right? Just working on acceleration. But if you don't train the deceleration portion of it too, that's where stability is most important, is through this deceleration phase and controlling that movement to allow for the next portion of our body to move. Now, this is also necessary to protect our joints. So just in normal life, right? A good stability exercise that I'll give people or test is just, can you do this, right? If they can't do that, I know that they don't have stability in their hip or in their knee. And we need to work on that, because what happens is stability is important because motion and forces, if we have stability in our joints, forces can be efficiently absorbed into that joint. If we don't have a stable joint, that's where the actual anatomical joint starts to take a beating. So you see a lot of hip arthritis, a lot of hip pathology, or a lot of shoulder arthritis or knee problems. It's because throughout life we're walking, right? And my hip isn't stable. So maybe every time I'm walking, I'm like doing one of these. And now my joint is taking a lot of that force. And then our body's like, I need to grow more bone to protect that. And that's where we start with hip arthritis. So stability is the most important thing in life, and also important in any kind of athletic activity too. And then it's necessary to be efficient. So like I said, any area in our body where we don't have stability, we're losing energy if we're trying to use that muscle. So, or use that area of our body. So in the golf swing, right, if I generate all this ground reactive force like I was talking about, and then now I start to rotate and I don't have good stability in my hip, now I've just lost all that energy and I can't get into the club, right? So that's why stability is so important. And just doing a stability routine every single day to just train this in your body is crucial for a lot of just general health in general. So any questions about stability? Have I lost anyone yet? No? Makes sense? Okay. So unstable joints lead to pain and degeneration, just like I said. We just take too much pounding in our joints and we're not stable there. All right, so I kind of answered this, but what's more important, acceleration or deceleration in the golf swing?
Both are important.
Exactly. I got you. You got it.
I have one like that together.
You can't have one without the other. Okay, so let's talk about ground reactive force. So this is acceleration, right? We're creating force that we're going to utilize throughout our swing. What is ground reactive force? So Newton's law, this is why I was scared if any engineers were going to be here because I'll probably botch a lot of this stuff. But I'm not a physicist, but I kind of understand it a little bit. But equal and opposite reaction. Who remembers that from high school? If you put a force into something, right, that exact same force is going to come right back into you. Okay. So in the golf swing, that's why it's so important to be able to generate that ground reactive force and then explode off of it. Because as I explode up, I've pushed, let's just say, 200 pounds of force into the ground. That 200 pounds is going to come right back into us. Okay. And now the vertical jump test is a great test that they do with a lot of golfers and athletes in general to see how much force can you generate into the ground, right? Because the higher that you can jump means the more force that you just put into the ground, essentially. So the average tour player has got a 20-inch vertical, right? And Greg Rose has done studies where he's compiled data from all these people. And if people have a 20-inch vertical and they use that amount of ground reactive force efficiently, they can get a 165 mile an hour ball speed, which 165 mile an hour ball speed is equivalent to over 275 yards if you hit it efficiently. Okay, so the average person can hit it 275 yards if you can get a 20-inch vertical. Now, long drive guys are 36 plus inch vertical, right? So that just shows you how much ground reactive force they can create into their swing, essentially. And I think the top long drive guy that just won this year is like a 42-inch vertical. It's crazy. He can generate like over 300% of his body weight of force into the ground, which is crazy. Big vibe.
Is that on tour or is that the silly little long drive competition guy?
That's just the long drive competition guys. Yep, the long drive guys. They have like 450 yards. First shot, right? Yeah. Yep. So this little graph, it didn't really show up as I wanted it to, but this is showing this is essentially showing the amount of pelvic lift that tour players get. So on average, this says 2 inches and this is supposed to see 2 inches, but on average, tour players here's the at the top of their backswing, and then here's after or right at impact right here, their pelvis will lift up about 4 inches on average. Okay, so getting here and then creating that ground reactive force and pushing up through, and this elevating 4 inches is on average what a PGA Tour player will do. Some like Dustin Thomas is like 6 inches. They'll elevate up. And you actually see him, guys like him and Scotty Scheffler will get airborne a little bit. And that's not that they're not jumping, it's just the amount of force that they're generating to the ground is so great that it's just elevating them up, right? Okay, so here's kind of another way to think about stability and how efficiency works, right? So talk about deceleration first. So deceleration helps golfers create more efficient transfer of forces from the ground up through the body and out the club head, right? So like I said, you maybe have a 40-inch vertical, but if you don't have a stable hit, which you probably wouldn't have a 40-inch vertical if you didn't have a stable hit, but some might, or you're gonna lose all that power into your, that you just created in your hip. It's gonna be absorbed in your hip and leaked out, and then you're not gonna be able to get that to the club, right? Or maybe we just don't know how to mentally rotate our hip the right way. You're gonna lose that kind of efficiency right here. So deceleration helps golfers more efficiently transfer force from the ground through the body. Okay, so, and I'll get into this into the next graph because it'll make more sense. But yes, at least it leaks is more important. Blocking the leaks is more important than generating the force. Hence why a guy like Justin Thomas can hit the ball 300 yards, because he's so efficient, has so much stability. I don't know if any of you have seen it from him on Instagram, but he does this exercise right here where he's holding it and he'll literally won't move his lower body. He'll just have a band and do some upper body rotations. So that just shows you like the stability that you need in order to hit the ball really far. Here's a good analogy is take a Corvette, right? So both of these are Corvettes. Let's just say they have the same amount of power, right? So they have the same engine. Now, if I take this car and I do a lap around, right, you're not gonna be able to go as fast because this car, you can tell, does not have the stability to withhold that amount of force. Does that make sense? So you're gonna wipe out if you try and get the same time as you do with that car. But this car has more stability in the hydraulics and in the suspension and everything, that it just can handle the turns more because it's more stable. It's lower to the ground and it can utilize that force that it's generating in control, essentially. So it's not leaking that force. As soon as this one spins out, that's when you find that leakage of energy. Okay, so has anyone here ever heard of the kinematic sequence in the golf swing? If you take away one thing from today, the kinematic sequence is like the number one thing that I just want you to think about, research, study, and try and do on yourself. But every professional golfer or good golfer, let's just say under a 5 handicap golfer for the most part, will have an efficient kinematic sequence, meaning that their body, the way that their body sequences throughout the golf swing is the exact same way. And the proper sequence is pelvis, thorax, arms, club, right? We see a lot of golfers who tend to like be very upper body dominant, right? We see a lot of golfers who are maybe their lower body and upper body move the exact same way, and then their hands go that way. We see some that are just upper body, right, and just throw the club at it. So that is a poor kinematic sequence. The kinematic sequence that shows is our lower body moves, then our torso moves, then our torso moves, which is green, then the shoulders move, and then the club at the end. Okay, and you can see here. So this is acceleration, and this is where the deceleration portion comes into it as well. So I'm accelerating my lower body first. Here's peak power, right? Then you notice it starts to decelerate the forces right here, but now I've reached the peak of my torso, and then that one decelerates, and now the peak of my shoulders is next, and then the club, right? So it looks like this. It looks like I'm here, my lower body moves, and then from here now my lower body is kind of stopped moving so that my upper body can slingshot off of it. Now my upper body stopped moving so that my shoulders can come through and slingshot off of it. And then my shoulders stop moving so I can release the club and come through the golf swing, right? So this sequence, if you can create all the ground reactive force, but you cannot sequence it like this, you're basically wasting your energy by even training ground reactive force, right? So movements are key, and that's what I'm gonna show you today is how to train these movements in your brain. Does that make sense? So lower body, thorax, arms, club. Here's another one. So you can see the lower body starts the downswing, then the torso, then the shoulders, and then the club, right? And they all sequence and they reach their peak amount of energy at all sequentially. Another one. And then here's the bad one, right? So this is like an amateur golfer. You can see here, we'll kind of digest this. So I'll show you what their swing would look like. But here's the lower body is the purple, right? It stays pretty level. There's not really a peak throughout the golf swing. They didn't even really start it first. Then you've got the upper body that's kind of moving with the same amount of intensity per se as the lower body. And you've got the lead arm that's very dominant, and the club is the most dominant. So this is a person that looks like this. So they go up there here, and then now they kind of start to move like this, and then they're like, oh no, I need to get the club down. And they just kind of come at it like this, right? So everything is just kind of moving the exact same, and they do that. Those are the people that hit a hook, or the people that will try and correct and they'll hit a block out to the right, essentially. Does that make sense?
You took that from my son, right?
Yeah. Good. Okay, so how do we do this and create the most force? Okay, so there's two ways. So impulse or velocity equals force times time. Okay, so we can either increase the force or we can increase the time. Two of the different, and it depends on what your body can do, right? So if your body can't generate the force, then we need to figure out a way to increase the time. If your body can't generate the time, like John Rahm, we need to figure out a way to generate the force, right? So how do we create more time? We just have a longer backswing, right? And that creates more time on the downswing. How do we generate more force? That's through just strength, mass, and so forth, right? So, probably the most effective one. So the average downswing is only about 230 milliseconds. Okay, so the problem with increasing our backswing is that we tend to lose posture, right? So we come here and now I stand up and now I've lost everything. I don't have any more energy. I basically unplugged. Greg Rose refers to it as unplugging yourself, right? So in the golf swing, we want to stay plugged in, and then now we want to come through like this. As soon as we come back and now we've unplugged ourselves, you can see I don't have any more energy to use for my downswing. So that's the problem with creating too far of a backswing, is a lot of times people tend to stand up, especially if you don't have the mobility in your mid back. Now, another way to create more time is, and power, is if you start your lower body the right way. So what the good players in the world do is they will come back like this, and they actually, at the last 5 to 10% of their backswing, they'll start their lower body, right? If you watch them close on TV, so now you can see they started their downswing and allowed for more time for them to generate more power, right? So that's why being able to disassociate or separate your lower body from your upper body is so important in the golf swing, because it just allows for more velocity. Does that make sense? So in summary, before we start to move around a little bit, the ability to disassociate the lower body from the upper body. Does everyone understand what that means? I didn't really hit that hard, but disassociation is when I can separate my movement of my upper body or any movement of my body from another body part. Okay, so separating my upper body looks like this, separating my lower body looks like this, and then separating my pelvis from my hips looks like this. Okay, and being able to do that is how you have to start to be able to generate any kind of force whatsoever. Increase force production, so increase strength to push into the ground. So can we generate the amount of force that we need through our body? The second. Then we have to have the ability to apply the brakes, right? So if I can't apply the brakes, then I'm going to have an energy leak. If my hip can't slow down, it's going to keep going, and then now I can't initiate the next segment of my body, right? And then we always need good range of motion throughout the mid back and then throughout the hips as well. Any questions on any of that stuff before we get into the next little bit of stuff? No? Right. So now you're like, what is the golf swing, or what is the golf movement screen? So TPI has come up with 16 movements throughout, and they just researched this and basically said, if you want to have an efficient golf swing, you have to be able to do these 16 movements efficiently. Okay. So the first one is the setup posture, and we're not going to go over all these today because it would just take too much time. But so the setup posture is key. So a lot of people ruin their golf swing just from before they even started to swing the club, right? So the two most common setup postures right here are the C posture that you see in a lot of older individuals per se, and then the S posture, which I typically see in a lot more younger individuals. And what these two things do is, one, they're huge components of low back pain, and they are gonna not allow you to create efficient power throughout your swings, just from the start up. So if I am in C posture here, right? And I'm here, I cannot rotate through my mid back. It locks out my spine actually in my mid back. So now, is that a mobility problem or is it a stability problem? Can you not just hold yourself here, or do you not actually have the motion to get into that position, right? That's something that is my job to figure out as a chiropractor is, are you mobile there? And do you need mobility or do you need stability? You have too much motion, right? You just don't know how to contract your muscles essentially. So that's number one, C posture. And there, it's just very hard for us to rotate through our mid back. S posture, on the other hand, is what I see more commonly in people, and now their stats are a little bit different, but I would say I see more S posture, just, I don't know, it's just something, but so S posture is where our pelvis is like this, right? And now if you do this to yourself, you're gonna notice your low back, people who have chronic low back tightness typically are stuck in more of an S posture position. Has anyone heard of lower cross syndrome? Or lower cross syndrome? Upper cross syndrome? So it's something that we see a lot here in this area, especially with all the tech people, but essentially lower cross syndrome is this. So we have weakness that typically happens here. We have tightness, and this is golf related, but not really. This is like just general health related. I'll draw this for patients often. So this is abdominals, our abs. This is our glutes. This is our erectors that are called, or low back muscles. Low back muscles. And this is our hip flexors. Does anyone know why we see a lot of tightness in these two and a lot of weakness in these two?
Desks all the time.
Exactly, right? So we sit at desk all the time, right? And I'm sitting here, so my hip flexors are in front of my hip. And I'm here, and then we sit and we'll try and give ourselves like good posture here, but I'm tightening my hip flexors all day long. I'm sitting here for 8 hours a day, and then you get up, you go watch your car, you sit in your car, right? Then you get up, you go home, you sit to eat dinner. Then you maybe go for a walk, and then you go back and you sit and you watch TV at night or whatever you do, kind of thing, right? So we're literally sitting, and then some people will sleep even with their feet up and their legs up like this. So we're sometimes in this position for like 23 of our hours a day. Some people are, right? So this is crucially important. This is somewhere where if you have low back pain, hip flexors is a common issue, but there's this thing called reciprocal, I don't know if I spelled that right, inhibition. And what reciprocal inhibition is basically our body's way of saying, okay, if I need to flex my hip, right, or I'll use the bicep, it's a little bit more clear. If I need to flex my bicep, right, my tricep has to relax, because if it didn't, I wouldn't be able to move my arm, right? If my tricep and my bicep relax or contract at the same time, I wouldn't be able to move my arm. So what reciprocal inhibition does is when we are sitting, we flex our hip flexors. So our hip flexors are getting utilized, which means the opposite muscle of our hip flexors are our glutes, right? So now we've trained our glutes to basically not work for the last 20 hours a day that we're sitting. And now we expect to go and have an efficient golf swing, which the glutes are very important in the golf swing, right? Or our abdominals the same way. So our erectors are constantly turned on in our low back. And we lose weakness in our abdominals, and then we go and we expect to have good posture in our golf swing, and we can't do it because we sit too much, right? So that's number one. And then number two is called upper cross syndrome, and that's just the opposite. So our pecs are really tight, our lower back muscles are really weak, and then our deep neck flexor muscles are really weak, and then these muscles in our back or in the back of our neck are really tight. So that's just kind of the opposite effects that can happen. And you can see upper cross syndrome occurring here, and you can see lower cross syndrome occurring here. Very common in anybody who sits, or just in the general population who doesn't train to fly.
Question.
Yep.
So everyone has stand-up desks here?
Yeah.
How often, like, what's the time difference that, like, is it 4 hours standing, 4 hours sitting? Like, what do you think we should do?
Yeah, I mean,
Better.
yeah, I would say that's a good place to start. I mean, standing is just preventing sitting. I mean, we sit so much. So if you're at work all day, you can stand, you're gonna go home and you're gonna sit throughout the day just from being tired and stuff like that, right? So Yeah, I'd say 4 and 4 is good. If you can do 6 and 2 would be even better to stand. The more you can stand, the more healthier you be, for sure. And then you can even do fun things like I'll tell patients, I just told someone this morning, she works at an office like that, has the same desk, and she has horrible stability in her right hip, right? So I said, okay, when you're at work, I literally want you to start to practice your stability like when you're typing, right? So there's cool exercises that you can do, or you can even do like a standing hip flexor stretch like this. You can start to type, right? Do a standing hip flexor stretch on this side and you can work, that's all good stuff because I've never seen, and Dr. Thompson, correct me if I'm wrong, have you ever seen somebody that is the opposite of this? Never, right? You've never seen somebody who has two or weak hip flexors is one thing, but you've never seen somebody who has the opposite, who has too strong of abdominals and too strong of glutes and not so on. It's very, very fair. So, yeah, good question. Okay, and the next test is called the pelvic tilt test right here. Okay, the pelvic tilt test is probably the most important test when it comes to power in the golf swing. And I'll explain why here. So the pelvic tilt test looks like this. Come here, you arch your back, and then you move your pelvis. So I wear a black belt here so you can see it today. But you can see how I'm not moving. It's a little shaky for me today because I just haven't done this in a while. And you'll notice that that's just my brain saying like, oh, you've been sitting a lot probably, so you need to get up and move. But it gets better as I go, right? So that's the pelvic tilt test. Why is this important? Because that is how I can transfer that energy that I've created from my lower body into my upper body. If I can't do that and I can't pelvic tilt, and I'll show you a cool video that shows Bryce Harper and Rory McIlroy, but you can see how if I can't pelvic tilt, you can see all that energy now, I've just put it into my upper body, right? If I can't do that, now this energy is stuck right here. This is where my leakage is. Make sense? And I'll show you a cool video that makes sense. But any rotational athlete, whether you're a tennis player, whether you're a baseball player, whether you're a golfer, hockey player, whatever, here it is. Boom. And at impact. So it's so important. At impact is when, I think the next one is a graph actually. Here's the graph. So this is a PGA Tour player. This is an average amateur golfer. So PGA Tour player, they kind of cut off a little bit, but 20 degrees of pelvic tilt at address is normal. Then as you come back into your backswing, you can see how it slowly decreases. So what this means is that as I come back, now my pelvis has started to flatten out a little bit, which takes a lot of strain off my low back. This is probably the most common thing that I see in people who have low back pain every time they play golf is they cannot do this test right here. So they come back and they start to tilt their pelvis. And then now it'll go up a little bit on the transition, right? We'll go back into like that S posture just a little bit. But then at impact, you can see how it's pretty much zero, right? This line is the impact, how the pelvis now is 0 degrees or it's level. So we're here, then as I come through, start to tilt, and at impact, it's level here. You can see that. Watch how Bryce Harper, boom, right? So boom, and as he goes, he can transfer that energy into baseball bat. Rory, who has one of the fastest pelvises of all time.
How many miles per hour is it again?
It's like 700 RPM. It's ridiculous. It's absolutely insane. Yeah, like average PGA Tour, I think is like 350. Roy's is like 700. It's insane. What's up, brother? This guy's
Come on,
late.
massively interrupted.
This guy's late.
Sorry.
But here's a common amateur golfer, right? And I'll show you why this. Does anyone here get low back pain when they play golf? Yeah.
I do now.
Pretty soon.
I get it anyway.
Like this, we can teach you how to twerk, right? So this is an amateur golfer, right? So at the top of their backswing, whatever, they're pretty good. And then now through their backswing, they basically stick their butt out like this, and they come in. And now I've just added a lot of compression onto my spine, essentially, right? So we forgot to bring a spine, but what happens is you can see how, which is a bad move of one of our chiropractors, but you can see how this just puts so much compression. If you do this to yourself, you'll feel all your muscles tighten up. As soon as you do this, you'll feel all your muscles relax, right? So just getting able to do this, you take all that pressure off. And our muscles don't like to do two jobs. So if I extend my muscles in my back and then I try and rotate them, that's where we're asking for that thing to do too much, and that's where we get strains in our back, right? So it's okay to have a little bit of extension, but then as soon as I start to rotate, I have to take that extension off so that I can allow the muscle to do its job of rotation kind of thing. Make sense? So you can see how it's good, and then it spikes up, which means that they've gone in more anterior pelvic tilt, and then they kind of go down. The next test is called the torso rotation test. So again, these are the 3 disassociation tests that I like to do. The torso rotation test is seeing, can you just separate your upper body and your lower body? Okay. So get in golf posture. Now watch my belt buckle, and it doesn't move. Right. So I can separate, my mind can separate my upper body and my lower body. You can see here's a good description of Tiger, right? You can see how much separation he has in his lower body and in his upper body. And then he still is not moving his pelvis, and he still has that separation going on. A lot of golfers, they just move these 2 things together, right? Any questions on that? Okay. And then 2 stability tests here. So the single leg stance, this is just showing how much stability you have in your hip. This is just an amazing test that you can do on yourself. And if you notice that your pelvis isn't level, that means that there's something going on in that hip. This is a huge predictor of people who will have hip replacements and stuff down in the future. And I see it a lot in runners too. Is anyone here a big runner? So runners, there's this thing called Trendelenburg gait that you see a lot in runners, where as they run, they'll strike with their foot and then their hip will kind of drop like this. And that's just weakness in this hip, and that hip is just taking. You can see how you can probably see it pop out of my pants right here. But as we do that, it just is dropping. So that's a common, and it's just due to stability in the hip. So the average person should be able to hold this for 15 seconds without falling. 15 seconds with and without your eyes closed. So this is one that you can literally do at your desk, right? And you can train. You could be able to do it in 15 seconds in a week and a half if you did it every day for a couple times a day. And then the last one is the bridge test. So this is just checking to see how much glute stability you have and how much glute strength you have, essentially in sequencing. Does anyone who here all works out in quite a bit, does squats and everything? Okay. Does anyone get like, who here is scared to squat because they're like, oh, my knees are gonna blow out or my back's gonna blow out? Anybody? A little bit, right? So this test is a cool test because it actually shows you if you do it, and it shows you what muscles you're utilizing anytime you bend over and pick something up. So if you do this test, you feel it in your glutes, that's really good. If you feel it in your low back, that's telling me that when you go and pick stuff up, you're recruiting most of your low back muscles, not your glute muscles. So a lot of people will feel it in their hamstrings. A lot of people feel it in their quads too. So just doing this exercise and trying to activate your glutes will help you, just with a lot of low back pain or any kind of pain when you're doing activity. Good. Okay. Any questions on any of that? Who wants to does anyone want to be a dummy and do a quick assessment on them? I'll do it. All right, let's do it. Okay, so we're gonna do a couple tests, all right? Do you get back knee at all? Upper, like shoulder, between shoulder blades when you play golf? Or just all the time? Generally all the time. Okay, yeah, okay, good. So, well, not good, but good. You can figure it out. Okay, so take that and let's put it across your chest, okay? And I just want you to hinge at your hips, try to hinge at your hips. Face that for me, if you don't mind. Okay, what do we see after? Keep going. Turn more this way. Turn more straight, okay. Come straight back up for me. Straight back up. Stand up. Okay. Now try and bend forward like you're gonna hit a golf ball. Yes. Right, so yeah, he's got this posture, right? Now, if I were to push in here, right, that's pretty tender probably. Do you get chronic back tightness? Okay. So now I'm not gonna tell him to fix anything. So if I was taking it on his round, he might just make up his posture, right? Now I'm gonna. What's your name? Colton. Okay. So Colton, now I want you to do what's called a pelvic tilt test. Okay, so what we're gonna do is you're gonna try and maintain this posture as well as much as you can. And all I'm gonna have you do is try and bring your belt buckle up towards your belly button here. Okay, without moving your lower body or your upper body. Okay. Do that again.
A lot of concentration.
So don't move your knees, bend your knees a little bit more. Don't move your knees, don't move your upper body, just move your pelvis. Right.
That's hard.
Exactly. And it's, you can feel how you're shaking, right? And that's like your brain just saying like, holy hell, what's going on right now? You know, what kind of movement is that? But so that's number one, right? So he can't pelvic tilt. So I already know that. Honestly, I'd probably stop him. I'm gonna stop right there, but I'd be like, we should just start right there, right? Number two, now let's work on the pelvic disassociation test. So what we're gonna do here is we're gonna try and separate your lower body and your upper body, okay? So all I want you to do without moving your knees or losing posture, saying no, because I just want you to rotate through your pelvis. So you can move your knees, just don't straighten your knees is what I'm trying to say. So here, and keep that upper body nice and still, and rotate your hips. Okay. So, do you mind facing them and kind of wagging your butt in front of them?
Oh, this way with my
Yeah.
face there.
Yeah. So do that again. Okay. So one thing that I see on him, right, is you do a decent job of it naturally, but he's got more like lateral movement, kind of like this, right? Instead of pure rotation like this. Okay. So try that again for me. Good. I'm gonna kind of help you out here. Good. So now let's rotate. Keep that upper body still. Yeah. Good. Now I'm gonna hold his upper body, right? So now do it. Way easier, right? Why was that easier? Because I just gave him stability in the support, right? So I held your upper body. Now let's do the same thing, but we're now going to do the upper body disassociation test. Right. Yep. That motion. So you actually passed this one pretty well. You can do it, right?
Easier to isolate the upper by far.
Yeah. Yep, good. So your problem right now is a lower body problem. Make sense? Now let's do one more test here on you. You're gonna have you hold the club out and you're just gonna do that stability test. Good. You should hear a runner, right? Good. Okay, do that. Do you get back pain when you run?
Yeah, sometimes.
Left side more?
I have like a chronic lean to my right,
Yeah.
sort of.
I'd like to look at your gait because, so what I've seen on you is do you cross over a little bit? Would you say with your right foot when you run?
Yeah.
Yeah, probably. Okay. Yeah. So yeah, you probably cross over because you have a little bit less stability in that hip, which just means that you want to bring your center of mass yourself. Makes sense? Yep. Okay. Do you mind getting on the ground? I'm gonna do a quick range
On my back.
Yep. Yep. So it's going like this. You get on the ground and then you're gonna just bring your hips up and then
I do use the gym, but I do have the weight for great.
good and come up. Okay. Now kick this leg out. Hold that right there.
Yeah, I'm shaky.
Where do you feel this? Glute, hamstring, quad? Feel it in your boot?
Mhm.
Excellent.
A
Good.
little bit
Quad in the quad. Good. We're gonna go like 3 more seconds. Feel it in your hammy at all?
a little bit.
It's starting to get in your hammy a little bit. Okay. And then now let's go up the other side and kick that good.
Much better.
Okay, good.
That's hammy, little glute,
Okay. Any quad?
not as much.
Okay. Good. All right. And come back up. Okay. So on him, we have to work on your pelvic motion, right? And then a little bit of stability stuff in the lower body. And that's where we would start, right? And then I would look at your golf swing and be like, where in your golf swing do we have to kind of be conscious of this, right? So good exercises. And how I would give this to anybody is just doing those tests, right? If you can pass the test then you can do it, right? So just work on, use the test as an exercise. So just here, there, and to kind of degress this, just grab a wall, right? And now just kind of work on out. Okay, sound good? Here, we'll do. Okay, yeah, nice job. So that's kind of the general lower body movement screen. There's more tests where we check range of motion, that kind of stuff too. Does anybody have any questions whatsoever? About their own golf swing, about anything? Yeah.
I mean, like I've seen shows where Tiger Woods talks about playing with celebrities on there's a play with the pro series.
Yeah.
And they're asking, oh, why do these guys hit it with that? He says it's all club hits. And then I'm watching Tony V now, and he does 3/4 swing and pokes it 325 yards, and it's not fun. It's the ground reactional force. It's all these things put together.
Right.
I mean, if I'm lucky to hit a 250, what are some things that are just basic, wholesome, holistic things to get everything like, trending in the
In the
longer
right direction.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
And I've already hit my mid irons.
Tiger's right. It is, yeah. So Tiger's right. It is club head speed, right? And how do we generate club head speed is by getting that energy that that's the only way to create club head speed is by getting that energy that we just created from the ground and somehow get it into the club. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So club head speed is huge. And that's why guys like Justin Thomas, who weigh 175 pounds, and guys like John Rahm, who weigh 250 pounds, or Brooks Koepka, can both hit the ball pretty much the same distance, right? It's because they just utilize their body the right way. So,
I mean, DJ's like 6'4".
right,
Rory's 5'8".
exactly. Roy hits it just as far as DJ,
Yeah.
if not farther sometimes, right? So it's just they are so efficient with their body, right? They're training, they're doing stability work all the time. They're just making sure that none of that force that they create or that they generate is being leaked out. It's all getting into the club. So to answer your question, what would I work on is literally, I would start by just passing these tests. And if you can get and start to understand that if I can get my body to move like that, then you can kind of move to the next step, which is training ground reactive force action, right? Like I said, if your body can't move and you can't disassociate your pelvis, then there's no point in kind of, you can create all that force, but it's gonna be leaked out, right? So just understanding and researching and talking, trying to think about, okay, start the swing with my lower body, then my upper body, then my shoulders, and then my club, right? And you'll notice that you'll start to just be more consistent, and more consistency just leads to more power, right? Smash factor is a thing in golf, where that's basically the efficiency of how well we hit the center of the face of the club. There's people who have like 120 mile an hour club head speed, but if their smash factor is 1.3, right? The ball's not going to go as far. But if you can get more consistent, that's just another way of improving your ball speed.
You should tell them about your few patients that you've had just in the last, was it 3 months, where they're hitting the ball just by doing basically what you're seeing here. He has them doing this in the clinic, and they're coming back to him, telling them how they did in their tournament, telling them how far they're hitting.
Awesome.
And they've been, 15, 20 yards farther just by doing simple tests like this.
Yeah. I had one girl that she's probably a good professional golfer. She's won 5 or 6 tournaments this year. She beat the field by 16 shots in her cluster. Yep, in a 4-day event. Yeah. She's and she hit it 20 yards farther easily. She was already an unreal golfer. I just taught her how to use her body the right way. We're not in my office, we're not in the gym lifting a ton of weight. It's literally just trying to maintain your stability and flexibility. You watch these guys on PGA Tour, they're not really, during the season, they're not lifting crazy weight. They're just trying to maintain their mobility and stability throughout their joints. The exercises that they're doing are just challenging their body, right? And before they go and play golf too, they're just doing things to make sure that their movement is optimal, right? And not just for golf, but just for life in general. That's what we do every day. I'll give people these exercises that I do with my golfers. And there's a standard person, because I'm if you can separate your hips from your upper body and you need to go pick over and grab something, now you've just done that, right? If I don't do that, now I bend through my low back and I throw my low back. So it's just common movements that we kind of lose to our life. that we need to do, but it's especially important in athletes just for performance perspective as well.
So I have a question
Of
about,
course.
once you identify what your weaknesses are.
Yep.
What you need to work on, and you do these tests, it's like before you go play a game of golf, grammatical. Would you focus on stretches that morning that are full body, or just focus on
Yeah,
one or two intervals?
right. So I do that for all of my patients that come in it's a good point. And I'm gonna say one thing, but last summer I did a study on myself. And I play golf a decent amount, so I would do things to basically disrupt. If I knew like I was just going out with my buddies and gonna have a good time, I would do things that would almost that I knew would disrupt my golf swing. So like one morning I went for like a 3 mile run, and then I went and played golf, and I shot like one of the worst rounds of golf I've ever played in my life. Then another morning, right, factors were like the same. I addressed all my deficiencies that I felt in my body that morning, and I went and shot a really good round, right? So it's very important, and that's why understanding what you can do, right? These tests have been research based. Like if you can do those swings or do those movements, you're gonna have an efficient golf swing, right? So like if you were to come in and just say, we find that your pelvis isn't moving, right? I would say, okay, before you go and play golf, you better darn well make sure that your pelvis can move, right? And now it's a hard thing because I know that if he can't do that test right here, there's no way he's doing his golf swing. Does that make sense? So now you're trying to implement training people with these movements and then training into their golf swing is a whole other thing, right? That's why I work with golf pros in the area, because I'm like, okay, you need to go and see this golf pro and then I'll tell the golf pro like, hey, this is what you do, this is what he needs to work on, blah, 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 right? But to your point, I always try and give my patients like a 10-minute everyday routine that is addressing their deficiencies. And they'll change, right? So one will be able, like, let's just say a month into treatment or whatever, he can now do this. I'm like, okay, now like let's find the next deficiency and just work on it, right? But trying to come up with like a 5-10 minute routine, because everybody's got 5 or 10 minutes kind of in their day, right? If you ask me to go work out for an hour, it's like trying to eat sometimes, you know? But yeah, 5-10 minute routine of just finding your deficiencies and kind of attacking it slowly just helps tremendously. And injury prevention too, right? I mean, golf, a lot of people get injured playing golf or any sport. So, yeah, people who can't pass those tests are at high risk of getting injured too. Especially if you get balls enough.
They had thought of,
Yeah.
you asked that question, we did a little test simulator at his place where we weren't working all these things. We actually were jumping when we were hitting the ball to see what it would do to the club head speed. And we had, Paulie was there, and we were like, do your normal swing as hard as you can, do a normal swing. And then it measures, right, what the club head speed and impact was. And then we said, okay, now jump up while you're hitting the ball, which was really weird. The ball went everywhere, but we couldn't consistently hit the ball where we wanted to at the beginning. But on average, what did it go up on everybody? 6 to 12 miles per hour?
Yeah.
On most people, which distance wise on the ball is going to travel it a lot farther. So when he talks about ground, he did a lot of, I would call it what I term as like basic, got to be able to do these movements. When it comes to ground reactive forces, there is a component, it's all on my Facebook because we always must talk about it now.
Yeah.
But where people are literally jumping and using the ground, and now the club head speed is going a lot faster because of it. However, to his point, if you do these things and you try to do that, it's gonna happen, you know, the ball's gonna go everywhere.
Yeah.
So that club head speed and being able to push off the ground, you're gonna see it go higher if you're measuring it on a simulator.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And you'll see, like, I'll tell people, like, okay, I want you to be airborne when you hit the ball, right? It's just a drill. Like, it's not something that I want you to think about on the golf course, essentially, because like I said, that force that you generate, the reason why these guys jump is because the force is so great that it's just causing them to jump. They're not actually trying to like get airborne, right? But if you can jump and hit the ball at the same time, meaning you're airborne when you hit the ball, I know that your forces have now gotten to the club. What you'll see a lot of times in people though is when I tell them to do that, they'll like hit the ball and then they'll like jump like way late. And I know that their lower body's not working the right way, kind of thing. But there's a whole nother presentation that I could do on so there's kinematic sequence, which is how the body moves sequences. Then there's the kinetics behind it, which is how the forces are applied throughout the swing. And that is a whole different sequence. And that's kind of why this stool, I could go over it really fast. We've got 5 minutes just to give you a little teaser. But what happens is on the downswing, the kinetic sequence is we go lateral and we load to this side now. Then we have to what they call rock and roll. So we have to get our body back into, or our spine angle back in neutral, because if we do this, we can't really rotate, or we can't stay behind the ball, right? So we're not gonna be able to shallow the club out. So we come here and then we rock and roll. And then from here now, it's that disassociation of our pelvis. It's a push through my leg. And that's how I efficiently, the top tour players, if you can do that sequence, you'll generate the most power. What I see a lot of people is they'll maybe get to their left side, and then let's just say they don't rock and roll, but then they start to come here, and then they're like, oh shit, now I'm gonna hit the ball left. So then they rock and roll, and then they like throw their hands at it kind of thing, right? So there's a whole nother presentation I could do on that, but that's called the kinetic sequence. But if you don't really start with the kinematic sequence and you don't really get this stuff down, that doesn't really mean anything, kind of thing, because you have to be able to disassociate your lower body and your upper body to be able to efficiently do the kinetic sequence. But there's kind of a cool test, and so I brought this because I didn't know how I was gonna get to it. But this is, if anybody has one of these chairs, you can even do it on these chairs probably, if the wheels are good. But this is essentially showing, we could take another person if you want. This is showing, this is a good way of demonstrating how you are using your lower body while swinging. So you can push, right, backwards and come back. That is how you are actually pushing off the ground, doing that, okay? And then there's the pushback, like I said, which is the last part of the swing. And then there's the rotation part where we're actually twisting, right? So here, and now I rotate around, right? Believe it or not, that's harder for people to do than it looks, right? So being able to do that. And then a lot of people are really good with their right hand, like myself, and I kind of suck with my left. But the average PGA Tour player is actually double the amount of force with their left foot, like this. So does anyone want to try that? Come on, yeah.
Oh,
But what you see a lot, what you see with a lot of people,
it's the opposite.
yeah, what you see with a lot of people who fail this, they'll have them come in and I'll say, all right, do this. This is the first thing that I see. They're like, push as hard as you can, and they're like, you know, they lead with their upper body. So now I know that their brain, it's really just me testing your brain. Does your brain know how to use your lower body at all to explode out, kind of thing, right? But if you think about it, like that rotational force, load, right? Then I rotate, so it's a twist. So I'm twisting, just like I demonstrated in the chair, and then it's a push, and it's the same thing. So people who typically will come up in their golf swing, it's called early extension. They do one of these things. The reason why they do that is because they're not actually they're not pushing their forces backwards. So you can see how if I come here, now I rotate and then I push backwards, how you can now see how I stay back and I allow my hands to come through the golf swing. I normally have some videos, but at our clinic when we do it, I hook up to my iPad. I think we're about out of time for today. So, any last questions? Did you guys learn something?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I know it's a lot of information, and we can come back and do it again, and talk about the whole upper body or whatever. But if anybody wants to, so anybody that was here, right? If you want to come in and just get a free evaluation in the clinic, feel free to do it. So I'll do a free evaluation on you. I'll tell you what you're doing. I'll give you a 5-minute exercise program and just kind of go over, especially if you have an injury or something like that, it's just a good thing to kind of go over. So just shoot us a call and tell Abby our front desk, or who knows where our front desk is going to be because she's pregnant about to explode. So just call our front desk, say, hey, I'm part of Holmberg Medical, and just say I was at the talk, and I'll do a free TPI screen for any of you guys. So
You're 3 miles away from.
here, yeah, it's super close, yeah. So I think, yeah, so it'll be good. But if anybody wants, let me know, and yeah, we'll have some fun. Whatever. Or if you have any injuries in general, right? If it's not golf related, just stop on in and do an examination on it. So sound good?
I gotta
Dr.
say,
Jake, what?
Mark and Jake, these guys came in here on their own to show us
what they know, and we have a dozen or so folks that use you guys, and we love you. Thanks for taking care of our company. Appreciate you coming in with us.
Thank you.
Yeah, I love it.
Maybe I think personal questions, and I'll stick around for a while, like 5 minutes or so.
Thank you. Sorry, I was late. I was gonna be sorry.
I know, yeah.
Especially for.
I already know it. Yeah. So they work hard. You know, I mean, it's harder. It's like, look, like, you feel like you should. I'm afraid to do that. Shake this. Your brain is trying so hard to do it.